The cold wind whispered through the narrow streets of Brussels as darkness draped over the city. In the dim glow of streetlights, unseen figures moved in the shadows, voices hushed, footsteps echoing faintly across cobblestones. A single drone hummed overhead, its red light blinking sporadically, barely audible but enough to send a shiver through anyone who noticed. Somewhere beyond the facades of elegant buildings, inside corridors of power, things were shifting. Rumors circulated of an impending strike, a drone assault hidden behind layers of conspiracy, intended to destabilize, to frighten, to leave a city questioning its own safety. Tonight, the calm surface of Belgium's capital conceals something far more unstable. And as viewers, we will follow the threads from suspicion to revelation. What follows is not just a tale of intrigue. It is a descent into fear, loyalty, betrayal, and truth. Each scene peels back another layer of the plot, another heartbeat, another hidden motive. Prepare yourself. Detective Aisha Moreau stood on the balcony of her modest apartment, staring out over the quiet neighborhood. The rain had just stopped, leaving wet pavements glinting under the street lamps. She sipped her coffee, but her mind buzzed with fragments of reports. An unexplained drone sighting near a sensitive government facility, blurred footage of something small, mechanical, flying low. No casualties yet, but the implications were massive. She replayed in her mind the message she had received earlier that morning. Anonymous, warning of consequences if she continued probing. The text had said only, "Stop now, or the skies will hurt you." A message that chilled her more than any cold gust. At the National Security Center in Brussels, analyst Victor van der Kind paced before a bank of screens. On one screen, a thermal signature dance. On another, radar blips moving at odd altitudes. Drone signatures, he thought. He cross-checked the data, consulted logs, and realized the operators were disguising their signatures, spoofing altitude, spoofing radar returns. Someone was deliberately masking. He tapped rapidly on his keyboard, sending alerts to superiors. But even as he did, he felt eyes watching him. The unseen pressure of conspirators who might already know he was digging. Across town, at the Ministry of Defense, Minister Claire Dubois held a private breakfast meeting with a top military official, General Martins. They spoke in low voices, over burnt pastry and strong coffee, but the tension between them was visible. The general had received intelligence of a possible drone threat tied to extremist cells. The minister, constrained by political optics, hesitated to publicize anything. She urged caution. The press was volatile, but General Martins insisted that they needed to prepare. Emergency protocols, air defense systems, even evacuation plans if necessary. The clash between caution and urgency hung thick in the air. Elsewhere, in a crumbling warehouse on the outskirts of Antwerp, a group of operatives gathered around workbenches. They delicately handled drones, dismantling cameras, refining payloads, calibrating flight software. A man with gloved hands checked circuits. Another scanned blueprints on a tablet. Their leader, a silhouette in the weak light, issued a quiet command. "Tonight, we fly." Every movement was deliberate, every eye hardened by resolve. They believed their message would be heard, and feared. Back in the city, Aisha's phone buzzed. A disguised number. "They're moving." Her heart skipped. She responded, but got no reply. She glanced at her files, photos, maps, intercepted chatter, and recognized coordinates in common with Victor's data. Her instincts screamed, "The threat is closer than we think." She hurried to gear up, forensic camera in hand, adrenaline sharpening her focus. She thought of her family, waiting at home, unaware of the danger looming overhead. At that moment, all across Brussels, air defense radars flickered. Something small, fast, and silent cut across the outskirts. No alarms yet, but the first stage of the plot had begun. In that hush, the city held its breath. Whoever pulled the strings behind the scenes was watching, to see who would move, who would hesitate, who would stop them. And our story begins at the moment when nothing is certain, and every decision carries weight. The next morning, the city woke up to an uneasy silence. The headlines spoke of rain and politics, but not of the buzzing machines that had moved like ghosts through the night. Detective Aisha sat in her office, eyes heavy with sleeplessness, scanning surveillance reports that had been mysteriously edited. Whole minutes of footage were missing, frames replaced by static. She knew what this meant. Someone powerful was scrubbing the evidence clean. Her fingers trembled slightly as she enlarged a single blurry still image from the footage, a faint outline of a drone hovering over the royal district where the European Council was housed. It wasn't a child's toy, it was a weapon. Victor, meanwhile, sat deep underground in the National Data Center, tracing frequencies that had appeared for less than 60 seconds before vanishing completely. The signals were encrypted with military-grade precision, bouncing off relay points in multiple countries before converging in Belgium. Whoever was behind this had access to serious technology, too advanced for small terrorist cells. He turned in his chair and murmured to himself, "This feels like a state actor." But before he could save the file, his monitor glitched, and every trace of the signal was wiped. He stared at the blank screen, realizing someone else was inside his system, watching him in real time. Across the border in Germany, an intelligence liaison received a coded transmission mentioning Operation Skyveil, a term that hadn't appeared in databases for over 5 years. The operation had supposedly been dismantled, its files classified. Yet here it was, resurfacing like a ghost. The liaison sent a warning to Brussels. "Check the skies. Skyveil has returned." Hours later, Minister Dubois received the same message and turned pale. She summoned Aisha and Victor to a confidential meeting, held in an underground command center beneath the city. "This stays between us," she said, her voice trembling despite her steel exterior. "If this leaks, panic will spread faster than the truth." As the three of them leaned over the glowing map of Brussels, a red blip began to move, one that wasn't supposed to exist. The air around them grew colder, and the unspoken truth sank in. The plot wasn't a theory anymore. It had already begun. Night had fallen again over Brussels, but the air felt heavier this time, charged with an invisible threat. Aisha and Victor sat in a dimly lit van parked near the outskirts, monitoring a field of antennas that intercepted unknown radio waves. The hum of electronics filled the air, and the tension between them was palpable. They hadn't spoken for minutes, both absorbed in decoding the strange bursts of encrypted chatter that appeared on their screen. Suddenly, Victor leaned forward and froze. The signal frequency matched one used by the Belgian military, but it was being broadcast from a civilian zone. "They're using our own system against us," he whispered, disbelief mixing with fear. Aisha grabbed her headset and tried to triangulate the source, her pulse racing as coordinates appeared. The location was shocking. A warehouse near the port of Antwerp, the same one she had seen on a surveillance list weeks ago. They moved quickly, the van tearing through the rain-slicked streets, every turn feeling like a countdown. In the warehouse district, fog rolled in from the river, making it hard to see more than a few feet ahead. The van stopped, lights off. They approached quietly, footsteps echoing, breath visible in the cold air. Inside the building, shadows moved, tools clattered, and faint beeping filled the silence. Through a crack in the metal door, Aisha saw it, rows of drones lined up, sleek, armed, and ready. Her stomach dropped. These weren't homemade devices. They bore serial markings from a defense contractor, one that worked directly with the government. "This isn't terrorism," Victor muttered. "It's an inside operation." Before they could retreat, a sharp metallic click echoed behind them. A voice, calm and low, said, "You shouldn't have found this place." They turned slowly to see a masked man holding a silenced pistol, his eyes unreadable beneath the hood. The moment stretched into eternity, rain tapping against the steel walls. And just as Aisha's hand inched toward her sidearm, a drone above them powered on, its red light blinking like an omen. The moment the drone's red light flickered on, the masked man fired a warning shot that shattered the metal panel beside Aisha's head. The deafening sound echoed through the warehouse as chaos erupted. Aisha dove behind a crate, pulling Victor down with her while bullets sparked off the walls. Above them, the drones began to activate one by one, their rotors whirring in unison, lights piercing through the darkness like a swarm of mechanical wasps. Victor scrambled to hack into his portable device, fingers trembling as he tried to override the drone's remote control system. "I can jam their signal, but only for a minute," he shouted. Aisha nodded, peeking over the crate and firing back toward the figure who had vanished behind the maze of metal shelves. The room was alive with motion now. Drones rising, alarms wailing, machinery clattering. Smoke filled the air, mixing with the stench of oil and gunpowder. Victor finally broke through the encryption and slammed a button on his tablet. The drones froze mid-air, spinning slightly before losing balance and crashing to the ground like dying birds. The silence that followed was terrifying. "We have to go, now!" Aisha gasped. They ran toward the back exit, their footsteps splashing through puddles of hydraulic fluid. Outside, the rain had turned into a storm, lightning cutting through the sky. Just as they reached the van, a black SUV screeched to a halt beside them, blocking their path. Armed men in tactical gear stepped out, their weapons trained directly on Aisha and Victor. The leader, face hidden under a hood, stepped forward and said in a chillingly calm tone, "You just interfered with a national operation." Aisha raised her weapon but hesitated. His words struck something deep inside her. Was this truly an attack, or something the government itself had created? Before she could think, one of the armed men lunged, knocking her gun aside. A fight broke out in the mud and rain. Brutal, fast, desperate. Victor managed to start the van, shouting for Aisha to get in. She barely dove through the passenger door as bullets shattered the back window. Tires screeched, sparks flew, and they disappeared into the storm. As the van sped through the dark highway, Aisha looked out the window at the city skyline in the distance. Somewhere above those towers, invisible and deadly, more drones were waiting. The van roared down the highway, rain hammering against the windshield like 1,000 desperate knocks. Inside, Aisha and Victor sat in silence, both catching their breath, drenched and shaken. The rhythmic sound of the wipers only amplified the tension between them. Aisha's mind replayed the masked man's words. A national operation. What did that even mean? Was the attack being planned by those sworn to protect the nation? Or had someone within the government gone rogue? Victor broke the silence first, his voice trembling but steady enough to cut through the noise. "If this is internal, we're not just dealing with terrorists. We're dealing with our own." His hands moved quickly over the laptop balanced on his knees, pulling up fragments of intercepted data. There it was again, the phrase, Operation Skyveil, appearing in coded transmissions tied to military servers. Aisha leaned closer, scanning the data as her heartbeat thudded in her ears. The operation was meant to be a defense experiment years ago, focused on autonomous aerial response systems, drones designed to neutralize threats before humans could react. But according to the hidden files Victor unearthed, the project was terminated after an internal failure. Now it was back, operating off the record, beyond oversight. Aisha clenched her fists as realization dawned. Someone was reviving Skyveil to create chaos. Maybe to justify new policies, maybe to seize power, or maybe just to prove control. As lightning split the night, they spotted movement in the rearview mirror, 2 black SUVs following them at high speed. "They've found us," Victor hissed. The van swerved as bullets shattered the side mirrors. Aisha grabbed her handgun and leaned out the window, firing blindly into the darkness. Sparks flew as one bullet hit an SUV's tire, sending it spinning off the road, but the other stayed close, relentless. Suddenly the van's dashboard flickered. The engine stuttered. Victor's eyes widened. "They're hacking us remotely!" he shouted. He slammed a command into his laptop, forcing a manual override. For a few breathless seconds, the van skidded uncontrollably, then jerked back to life. They turned sharply into a narrow side road leading into the forest. The SUV followed for a moment, headlights slicing through the trees, then disappeared. When the van finally stopped, only the sound of rain on leaves remained. Aisha slumped against the seat, heart pounding. Victor looked at her, his eyes full of fear and determination. "We can't trust anyone anymore," he said. Aisha stared out into the storm and whispered, "Then we'll find the truth ourselves, even if it kills us." By dawn, the forest was wrapped in fog, and the van sat hidden beneath the thick branches of an oak tree. Aisha hadn't slept, her eyes fixed on the laptop screen where Victor traced the last fragments of intercepted drone communications. The faint static pulses they'd been following led them to something unusual, a private satellite uplink operating under a fake telecom license, registered to an abandoned tech firm on the outskirts of Ghent. The deeper Victor dug, the clearer the pattern became. The drones weren't being controlled locally. Their commands were coming from a ghost network, a parallel system running beneath official infrastructure, invisible to radar, untouchable by conventional security. Someone had built a second digital skeleton beneath Belgium's defense system, and now they were using it to hijack its own machines. Whoever did this knew everything about our protocols, Victor muttered. They're not outside, they're inside. Aisha tightened her coat and glanced at the gray sky, every instinct screaming that time was running out. They drove toward Ghent, passing through small towns that looked peaceful on the surface but felt hollow underneath, as if everyone subconsciously sensed something terrible approaching. The address led them to a desolate industrial park. The building ahead was crumbling, its windows shattered, walls covered with ivy. But inside, humming softly, servers still blinked with light. Victor stepped closer, breath visible in the cold air, fingers hovering over the keyboard of a control console. He bypassed 3 firewalls, then froze when a familiar name flashed across the screen, General Martins. The same man who had warned Minister Dubois days ago. Aisha's stomach twisted. He's not stopping this, she said quietly. He's behind it. Before they could process it, the server fans roared louder, the screens flickered, and the data began deleting itself. Someone was watching their intrusion in real time. A voice echoed from a hidden speaker, calm, collected, and hauntingly familiar. You've gone too far, Detective. Aisha's blood ran cold. It was Martins. His voice carried no guilt, only authority. You think you're saving lives, but you're standing in the way of something greater. Belgium needs fear to stay alert. The line went dead, the lights cut out, and the only sound left was the faint whir of drones outside the building. Aisha grabbed Victor's arm and whispered, "We're not alone." Outside, through the mist, tiny red lights began to appear. 1, then 2, then dozens, moving in perfect formation toward them. The sound hit first, a low mechanical hum that grew louder with every heartbeat until it filled the air like a swarm of angry bees. Aisha and Victor crouched behind a rusted generator as the first drone descended through the fog, its light slicing through the mist, scanning for movement. Dozens more followed, their synchronized flight patterns too precise to be human-controlled. "They're on autonomous mode," Victor whispered, panic tightening his voice. "They've locked onto thermal signatures." Aisha gritted her teeth, her breath shallow. "Then we need to make them blind." She grabbed an oil-stained tarp and threw it over the generator, forcing Victor to crawl under with her as she smashed a glass fuse box open and yanked out wires. Sparks flew. The sudden power surge confused the nearest drones, their sensors flickering. "Now!" Victor hissed, and they bolted toward the back exit, boots splashing through puddles as the hum of propellers grew deafening. Outside, the dawn sky burned red, not from the sunrise but from the reflection of dozens of blinking drone lights spreading across the horizon. Each drone was armed with a small payload capable of a localized blast. Victor's laptop beeped violently. His software had intercepted a live transmission. The message read, Phase 2, Target Lock Brussels. Aisha stopped dead in her tracks. "They're moving to the capital." She looked at Victor, eyes wide with horror. "They're not testing anymore. They're deploying." They jumped into the van and sped back toward the highway, tires screeching across wet gravel. On the radio, a breaking news alert interrupted regular programming. Reports of multiple drones seen hovering above restricted zones near the European Parliament. The government had issued no statement, but panic had already begun to ripple through the city. Victor typed furiously, trying to trace the uplink's main hub, but every signal led back to encrypted military frequencies. "He's covering his tracks," Victor growled. "Martins is using national defense systems to hide this operation." Aisha gripped the wheel, her knuckles white, as they neared the city limits. "Then we expose him," she said fiercely, "even if we have to die doing it." The van sped across the empty motorway, and for a brief moment, she looked up at the sky, now a web of red lights gliding silently above the waking city. The first sirens began to wail in the distance, signaling that the people of Brussels were finally realizing the nightmare that had been circling them all along. By the time Aisha and Victor reached Brussels, chaos had already begun to unravel. The skies buzzed with drones circling above government buildings while terrified civilians flooded the streets below, searching for answers. The army had been deployed, but confusion reigned. No one knew who was truly in command. Aisha's phone rang, and the caller ID made her heart skip, Minister Claire Dubois. She answered breathlessly, "Madam Minister, we know who's behind this. It's Martins." But the voice on the other end wasn't one of relief. It was cold, measured, almost resigned. "I already know," Dubois said quietly. "He's been running this operation under my nose for months. And I let him." The words froze Aisha. "You let him?" Dubois sighed, her voice breaking slightly. "Do you think anyone listens when you warn them about invisible threats? Martins told me he could create fear to unite people again, to make them believe in their government. I didn't know it would come to this." Before Aisha could respond, the line went dead, replaced by static. Victor looked at her, pale and trembling. "She's compromised." In that moment, the van's navigation screen blinked to life, displaying a new message. "Deliver the evidence to Parliament. Stop Skyvale." 1 hour before activation. Aisha's instincts told her it was a trap, but they had no other lead. They sped toward the Parliament building, streets choked with abandoned cars and blaring sirens. Halfway there, a convoy of armored trucks appeared behind them, marked with military insignia. Victor's eyes widened. "That's Martin's unit!" Gunfire erupted, bullets tearing through the van's metal frame. Aisha swerved through barricades, her heart pounding so hard it drowned out the gunfire. The convoy followed relentlessly, but Victor uploaded the remaining data to a secure cloud, shouting over the chaos, "If we die, the truth still goes out." A rocket hit the side of the van, sending it spinning. They crashed hard, glass shattering, smoke filling the air. Aisha coughed, disoriented, ears ringing. When her vision cleared, she saw a familiar figure walking toward the wreck, the uniform, the cold eyes, the faint smirk beneath the rain. General Martin stood before her, gun in hand. "You were supposed to serve the system, Detective," he said softly. "Not destroy it." Aisha glared up at him through blood and tears. "I serve the people, and they'll know what you did." Martins cocked his gun, but before he could fire, a sudden explosion ripped through the air. One of his own trucks ignited, flames swallowing it whole. Victor had triggered an EMP from the van's dashboard, shorting every device nearby. Drones fell from the sky like metal rain, and for a fleeting second, hope flickered through the chaos. But Martins was still standing, weapon raised, fury burning in his eyes. "You can't stop what's already begun," he growled. And above them, the surviving drones reactivated, rising once more into the blood-red sky. The sound was deafening, 1,000 mechanical wings cutting through the wind, vibrating the air like an approaching storm. Aisha stumbled from the wreck, coughing through smoke, her ears ringing, her body trembling with exhaustion. Victor dragged himself beside her, clutching his laptop, its screen cracked but still glowing faintly. Around them, flames lit up the street. Sirens wailed from every direction, and panicked civilians ran through the chaos as the drones began to descend in perfect formation. Above the city, the swarm gathered into a black cloud, covering the sky until not a single patch of blue remained. "They're positioning for detonation," Victor gasped. "If they deploy, the entire central district is gone." Aisha's eyes locked onto Martin's, who stood a few feet away, untouched by fear, watching the spectacle like a man admiring his own creation. "You think this will save the country?" she shouted, voice raw. He turned to her, rain dripping from his cap, his expression disturbingly calm. "You don't understand," he said. "Fear creates order. Once they see how easily we can lose control, they'll surrender their doubts. They'll let us rebuild." His words were cold, rehearsed, almost fanatical. Aisha felt rage ignite inside her chest. "You're not rebuilding anything," she spat. "You're destroying everything we were meant to protect." She rushed forward, gun raised, but Martins fired first. The bullet grazed her shoulder, spinning her to the ground. Pain shot through her body, but she refused to let go of her weapon. Victor, bleeding from his temple, slammed one last command into his laptop, a desperate override signal aimed at the Ghost Network's core. "If I can reroute the control back to the original defense grid, we can shut them down," he shouted. Sparks flew, his fingers trembling, the screen flashing red warnings. Martins turned, realizing too late what Victor was doing. He raised his gun, but Aisha fired first, hitting his leg. He fell screaming, but still tried to reach for his pistol. Victor's system beeped, an alert flashing, "Manual override active, authorization required." He looked up at Aisha, eyes wide with pain. "You have to do it," he said. "Your badge ID, enter it now." Aisha crawled beside him, blood mixing with rain as she pressed her trembling hand to the scanner. The system recognized her identity, triggering the emergency shutdown. One by one, the drones above began to flicker, their lights fading. The hum softened, then fell silent as the swarm froze midair. But just before they crashed, a deep metallic tone echoed, a backup system initiating. Victor's screen went black. "No," he whispered. A new message appeared. "Final protocol. Manual detonation authorized." Martins laughed, his voice hoarse but full of triumph. "You can't stop destiny, Detective." And then a blinding flash erupted above them as one of the drones exploded, setting off a chain reaction that lit the sky like a dying sun. The explosion tore through the clouds like thunder, painting the city in a firestorm of orange and red. Buildings shook, alarms blared, and windows shattered for miles. Aisha's world became a blur of smoke, fire, and chaos as she shielded Victor with her body. The shockwave threw them both against the wrecked van, glass slicing through their clothes. For a moment there was nothing but silence, the kind that follows death. Then came the faint sound of drones crashing into rooftops, one after another, like metal rain. The city was burning, but somehow, still standing. Aisha opened her eyes, coughing, her ears ringing with the echo of the blast. The drones had stopped exploding. The chain reaction had broken midway. She looked around and saw Victor lying beside her, blood running down his temple, his laptop shattered. Did it work?" she asked weakly. He smiled faintly through the pain. "Mostly. I rerouted the network before it finished the sequence. Half the swarm self-destructed, the rest shut down." Relief and grief collided inside her chest. But as she tried to stand, she saw Martins crawling toward his gun, face twisted in hatred. "You ruined everything," he hissed. Aisha staggered to her feet, bleeding, shaking, but unbroken. "No," she said softly. "We saved them." She kicked the gun away, grabbed Victor's damaged laptop, and pressed the emergency broadcast key that sent their collected evidence, videos, files, intercepted orders, straight to every media outlet and independent server across Europe. Within minutes, screens all over the city lit up with breaking news. Military general exposed in drone conspiracy. Citizens watched in shock as Martins's voice echoed through the airwaves, his own confession betraying him. Helicopters swarmed the area moments later. As soldiers surrounded the fallen general, Aisha sank to her knees beside Victor, holding his trembling hand. The rain washed away the soot on their faces, and for the first time in days she saw the sky clearing. The nightmare was ending, but at a cost. Victor looked up at her, his voice barely a whisper. "You did it, Aisha. You stopped the storm." She smiled weakly, tears mixing with rain. "We both did." His hand went still in hers, his eyes slowly closing as sirens wailed in the distance. Aisha looked up at the horizon where dawn broke through the last clouds, its light reflecting off the ruined city. She whispered to the wind, "You'll be remembered." As the sun rose over Brussels, the city tried to heal. The streets were scarred, the people shaken, but the truth had come out. Operation Skyveil was no longer a secret, and those who died exposing it became symbols of courage in a world ruled by fear. Somewhere in the quiet of a hospital room, Aisha stared at the sky through her bandaged reflection, wondering how many secrets were still floating above unseen, waiting to strike again. Because one file on Victor's laptop had never decrypted a file marked Skyveil Phase 2 Global. The camera pans upward, fading into the silent blue sky where a single faint red light blinks, unseen by all. And with that haunting image, the voiceover whispers, "Some storms never end, they just wait for new skies." If you felt the tension, the emotion, the fear behind this story, don't forget to like, share, and subscribe, because the truth we uncover here might just be the one the world never wants you to see.